All right, guys, breaking news. Wow, breaking. Gather round. Screw your faces to your televisions. Don't look away. Stare at your phone. Stare at your laptop. Stop gooning. Put your socks on. It looks like there's been an announcement that Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire. What does that mean? What are the terms? Who won? Let's look into it. We're awaiting an announcement currently from the Qatari Prime Minister, who's going to announce finally, but it looks like officials on all sides are fairly confident that at the very least, the first phase of a three-phase plan has been agreed to. Ironically, it looks very similar. It looks very similar so far to the three-phase plan that was put on the table in May, quite a while ago then, May. About 7 or 8 months ago. And the understanding, I believe, is that ceasefire deal started with Israel saying, yeah, we agreed to this in principle, balls in your court, Hamas. Then Hamas says yes, changes some terms, and then Israel says no to that. But that thing that Hamas seemed to say yes to and Israel said no to, this is quite similar. But there are differences. There are some differences, and how crucial they are is going to matter. So you can look at the terms here, stage 1, 2, and 3. You'll notice stage 2 and 3 are much more skinny than phase 1. That's because the details have only really been ironed out and agreed on for phase 1. Phase 2 and 3 is still yet to be determined. For example, phase 2 involves a negotiation. So second phase is basically like an Oslo Accords thing. It's like an agreement to have an agreement, you know? It's an agreement to talk about an agreement. So it looks like 42 days henceforth is more or less set. It's going to involve a temporary cessation of military hostilities. It's going to involve some technicalities, like they're not going to do air reconnaissance operations for 10 hours a day. There's going to be a return of displaced people to their areas of residence, including Netzarim, you know, the area where Israel has a corridor going through it, including there. 600 trucks a day of relief and humanitarian aid, and the exchange of 33 Israeli hostages, some of whom are dead. So some will just be the bodies. These would be women, children, and men over 50, mainly. And it seems to be that Hamas are going to be getting 30 to 50 prisoners per hostage. If the hostages are soldiers, it's 50. If they're just civilians, it's 30. Some of these people who are getting released from the Israeli prisons are people with life sentences. So for the same reason as May, among other reasons, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, Ben-Gvir for 100% has threatened to walk out if this deal gets accepted, to leave the government, which means that Netanyahu's coalition will be lacking to be a majority. Smotrich might be going. He threatened to leave last time over a similar deal to this in May. But it does look like, honestly, if this deal is the way it's laid out, and there is a lot of conditionality on phase 2 and 3, because there's no resolution yet on whether or not Israel is going to allow Gaza to remain in government when the IDF leaves. There's also, I think, Arab negotiators are still questioning details about implementation over maps. And if they're talking about maps, that probably suggests that the IDF are not going to have a complete exit, which is what was asked for in May. So that's a bit different as well. So how much the IDF actually stays along the perimeters of Gaza, or if they keep any parts of any corridor, is still up for dispute, I think. But ultimately, we are waiting for a very final confirmation from the Qatari Prime Minister. And from then on, it's honestly, the way that this looks right now is it looks very much like a win for Hamas. And you might think, well, Hamas just had the shit kicked out of them for 15 months. How could this be a win? Well, it looks like a win because if this deal is actually as close to the previous one as it appears, then that just means Israel wasted 6 or 7 months. Completely just wasted it. It also suggests that Israel's goal of destroy Hamas has not been achieved. And if you are a conventional army, if you don't achieve all your objectives, if you don't win, you've lost. If you're a guerrilla force like Hamas, if you don't all die, then you've won. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And there's also all kinds of technicalities, like the Palestinian prisoners who get released can't just be rearrested on the same charges that they were jailed under. So, yeah, it's like It's a propaganda win for Hamas. It might even be a practical win for Hamas. I'd be really curious to see how this third stage goes, which involves a beginning of a reconstruction plan for Gaza for 3 to 5 years. Because if Hamas oversees this, that's a win, because we just go back. What do you think Hamas is going to do in 3 to 5 years? Hamas's leaders, the ones who are still around, people like Khaled Mashal, people like Ghazi Hamad, like these people have never said that they want to recognize Israel and go to a new phase of relations in the Middle East. They've never said they want to accept the two-state solution or stop trying to attack Israel. They've never said that. So if we do get 3 to 5 years of Hamas reconstructing, they are going to reconstruct. They're going to learn their lessons from this war, and they're going to reconstruct so they can go for another one. We'll be back to phase one. We'll be back to square one again. So if that happens, and if this deal goes the way it seems to be going, it looks like Hamas have managed to pull something from the jaws of defeat. The only thing I can imagine is, based on what I've heard from Israeli sources, would be that it's possible that if they're talking about maps and they're talking about the layout of Gaza after the war, it's possible that the IDF are going to have some kind of arrangement in Gaza so that they can just react almost like instantly to any kind of Hamas recuperation. Like if they see military equipment or if they see tunnels getting rebuilt, then they just go and airstrike like within 5 minutes. Like that's maybe because that was the whole point of the corridors or just like the border presence. And even Gallant said that they don't necessarily need the Philadelphia corridor to be able to do that. They can just have like a perimeter. They can increase surveillance. They can obviously have a blockade that's more effective than last time. They're not going to make the same mistake ever again. They're not going to be like, oh, don't worry about that. Those training sessions where they're practicing raiding Israeli towns. Don't worry about that. You know, they're just memeing. You know, we've got it on strong authority that they just plan on vibing and keeping the peace. So, did I hear wrong? They will exchange one hostage for 30 terrorists. What the fuck? Welcome to Israel Palestine, Bubba. Yeah, that's exactly what they'll do. Yeah. I know what's funny is that Trump is taking credit for this, and he might not be completely wrong, because my understanding is that Trump's aides were involved in this. No? Trump's aides were involved in this. There was that story about one of Trump's aides trying to go to a meeting with Israeli officials, and they were like, no, it's Shabbat. And then apparently Trump's aide said, I don't give a fuck about your fucking Shabbat. Shabbat shmabat. How do you do that thing? Holiday schmoliday. You can't really do that, though. You can't really write off the word Shabbat with that technique, can you? Because you'd just be saying Shabbat, Shabbat. Oh, Shabbat, Shabbat. That just sounds like you're encouraging them to take their Shabbat day off. I don't know. I think I need to, when it comes to the input of Trump versus the Democrats versus what convinced Bibi to accept this, but not the one in May, that's a huge question. Like I'm not concluding on that, like, until we know more about what happened. But if you want to hear it from the incredibly round horse's mouth, the incredibly tangerine-tinted horse's mouth, Trump, Truth Social. This epic, you know it's epic because it's in all caps, ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I am thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. We will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region, as we can build upon the momentum of the ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed, so they can secure more victories for the United States. So, what's that? Is that an L for liberalism? Is that an L for leftism? Is that an L for Biden for kowtowing to, or trying to kowtow marginally to left-wing demand for the last 15 months? Is it a win for Trump, for the art of the deal? Is it just they should have read the art of the deal? Who knows, man? Who knows? Again, we're reserving all analysis on this particular thing because the big question now, okay, and this is the question everyone should be asking before they go further, is what changed between May and now? That's it. Why is this deal? Is there a very crucial difference in this deal? Is there a crucial difference with facts on the ground? Is it to do with the Americans? Does it have nothing to do with the Americans? That's what you need to know. And we're not going to learn about that. We'll probably learn about that soon because people are going to speak. Once that goes through, people will say things. Right now, the problem is that officials are very much keeping their details close to their chest. It could also be that the situation in Gaza, and especially the situation with aid and the deterioration of infrastructure and everything, has just meant that the hostages either come back now or they die. And it's just that Hamas actually won by holding out. It could have nothing to do with the Americans or with Netanyahu's politics or anything. It could just be that they finally reached their breaking point on the hostages. Lol, Biden wasn't pro-Israel enough according to you, and you say you aren't a propagandist. That's exactly what I said, Adam. You fucking miserable, dishonest, scheming little cunt. I don't know. Like, I feel like if you guys hate me so much, like, why don't you just accurately state my positions like once? You're literally the kind of person, the kind of like drunk guy in the fucking street who sees someone and just decides to attack them because they think they looked at them funny. It's like, why? Why do you have to let your fucking retarded hatred be someone else's problem? Like, go away. Get therapy, moron. Okay. Anyway, in other news, I never spoke about Lebanon's situation. In Lebanon, it's a bit different so far. The ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah is supposed to reach the 60-day timeline limit in, I think, the 27th of this month. I think it's something like between, I think it's something between sort of like 8 and 12 days from now. It's just over a week, a bit under 2 weeks. And it's potentially going to go over the 60 days. It actually seems quite likely it's going to go over the 60 days. But we'll see. We'll talk about that later, though. Right now, Lebanon has elected a new president. They were without president for quite a while. If you want to know how the system works, basically, in Lebanon, the prime minister of the country always has to be a Sunni Muslim. The speaker of the parliament is always a Shia, and the president is always a Maronite Christian, because Lebanon's weird, okay? Lebanon's been without a president for a few years now. They've been without a president for a few years now because the presidents are elected by the parliamentary representatives. That's how they're chosen. They're chosen by parliamentary representatives. And the problem is that Hezbollah usually has a preferred candidate. They throw their weight behind a pro-Hezbollah Maronite. The issue is that they were struggling to get their favorite candidate over the line. So what they would do is they would just walk out. The votes would take place. They would go through a certain number of rounds. And rather than cast their votes and allow the most popular person to just become the president for the sake of the country, they would just leave, right? This time they didn't use that strategy, though. They voted against this guy, Joseph Aoun, in the first round, but then voted for him in the second round just to save face, to be like, look, we're the ones who determined the outcome of this election, right? Which is really them kind of coping because they can't use the strategy that they normally would. So this guy is a military chief. He has put very strong emphasis on national unity and Lebanese sovereignty across the entire country, which means the Lebanese military having control and jurisdiction over the entire state. He's implemented that to some degree already. There have been towns in the south that have been secured by the Lebanese military. There have been others where there haven't been that happening, where Hezbollah have gone, like, bypass the military to go down, and then the IDF ends up bombing them. But the interesting thing about this new leadership is that it basically, unlike what's happened with Hamas, this is basically a very, very big blow to Hezbollah because this is not the candidate that they wanted. And he also is completely against Hezbollah's goals. This guy is a pro two-state solution guy in line with the Arab Peace Initiative. He's a two-state solution guy. And on top of that, His pick for prime minister, which was also approved by the Lebanese parliament, the Sunni guy, is this man here, Nawaf Salam. You might recognize him. He is also the president of the ICJ, overseeing the genocide case. He replaced the American lady. He's no longer the president of the ICJ, obviously, because that's a huge conflict of interest. But yeah, there he is. And this guy is quite interesting as well because Lebanon has they have a very odd position on Palestinians. It's a very bad one as well. Obviously, there are a few 100,000 Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. The data on them is very difficult to gather because some of them became citizens very early on, say in the 50s, and some became citizens in the 90s as well. Some of them refused UNRWA assistance because they thought they were too wealthy or too well off to be classified as refugees, because a lot of the initial people from what's now northern Israel who fled the 48 war were middle and upper class people who just wanted to get out of the way. And then there are others who just live in total destitution. Like they are refugees. They just live in basically slums where there are still bullet holes in the buildings from when they were massacred by Christian militias. They don't really live a very good life, and they are non-citizens. They live in these camps. These camps are very much the Wild West. Like the Lebanese military, until recently, is not involved in it. The new president has said he wants to get the Lebanese military involved in these camps. But before then, they've basically just been run by clan leaders, gangs, some Hamas, some Fatah, like mobs. But their general position is that Lebanon refuses to give them citizenship for different reasons, though. Lebanese Christians don't want to give them citizenship because they see them as a demographic threat. It's better for the Lebanese Christians that we don't know census data in Lebanon, really, especially for Palestinian refugees. So they just get to kind of downplay their numbers. We'll just use the lowest estimates and stop giving them citizenship. For the rest of them, for the Shiites, for Hezbollah, they don't want to give citizenship to the refugees either because it would kill the right of return. And the right of return is a weapon against Israel, right? As soon as you naturalize Lebanese Palestinian residents, then you are basically implicitly recognizing Israel, or at least too much for Hezbollah's liking. But Sunnis are a little bit different. There have been some Sunni leaders who stand somewhere in favor of Palestinian normalization in Lebanon. This guy's one of them. He wrote this essay in the Journal for Palestine Studies in the 90s. So before I think it was post-Oslo, but before Camp David. And his position is that, I can just read it to you actually. This is what he wrote in the 90s. The implications for the Palestinians of Lebanon are clear, especially given, in addition to the factors cited above, the limited absorptive capacity of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Even were this not the case, one wonders how many Palestinian residents of Lebanon, the vast majority of whom are from northern Palestine, would want to settle in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, whatever the resulting improvement in their social and political status. Venturing still further into the realm of hypothesis, one could question how many would actually opt to return to their places of birth if given the chance, considering that most of their houses, villages, or neighborhoods have either been obliterated or changed beyond recognition. Nor should the prospect of living as members of an Arab minority in a state within a Zionist ideology be underestimated. One must conclude then that the majority of Palestinians in Lebanon will not be able to return. So he's not openly trying to cede the right of return, but he is saying that the gist of this essay, the crux of it, is him advocating for some kind of residency for Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. So you have that combined with a fairly pro-Western, anti-Hezbollah president. I don't know, the situation in Lebanon could just be altered. Like the landscape of Lebanon's politics could just be very, very different. They're also going to reopen the investigation into the port explosion. You know, where Hezbollah's stored ammonium nitrate exploded and killed a bunch of people from 2020, 2021 or something? Yeah, that port explosion. That's going to be reopened for investigation. How much they'll find in this second round, I don't know, but Hezbollah protested very aggressively against that investigation. They were not happy with it. And also, obviously, with Assad, their little patron in Syria, being fucked over, then, yeah, I'd say they're in trouble, Hezbollah. So, given the terms of it's good to compare this as well, because if you look at the outcomes and the terms of the Lebanon Hezbollah ceasefire, the Israel Hezbollah ceasefire, you can see that that's very much against Hezbollah. Like, that's a win for Israel, because Hezbollah said, we're going to stop firing if you stop fighting in Gaza. But they accepted a ceasefire that did not involve Israel stopping in Gaza. They gave up their one demand, their central, the core demand, they gave it up in exchange for breathing space. So, and they accepted that ceasefire even when the Americans attached a side letter saying that if Israel's not happy with how UNIFIL or the Lebanese army deals with Hezbollah in the south, then the IDF can just bomb them. Like, they accepted that. They accepted that American input. They went with that. So that's definitely, like, you can tell a ceasefire deal like that is a win for Israel. This one in Gaza, it looks nothing like that. This one in Gaza is like, they just want to get the hostages back, it seems. It seems like they're just going to take the hostages, and Israel's initial thing, which was total victory, no more Hamas in Gaza, no more return to status quo and all that, that looks like it's at least partially being ceded, because they're going to withdraw from Gaza without having vanquished Hamas. So that's where we are now, awaiting further updates. Oh, there's a goat. Also, you can see they're celebrating in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah, so obviously the Palestinians in Gaza are quite happy with this. I don't know if they're happy because they think they won or because they just are not going to die anymore for a little while. I don't know, probably a combination of both. It looks like part of that Palestinian return is going to include the north, so it looks like they're going to go back up to the north as well. And it seems that Israeli surveillance of Hamas movements are just going to be aerial. It's not going to be that whole thing that we saw with the multiple corridors and the observation towers and everything else. Don't know. It's also quite interesting because when it came to Netzarim, based on the installations they were putting up in that corridor, it looked like they were there to stay. Like, they were putting buildings in there and infrastructure in there that would imply a long-term stay from the soldiers, but looks like they didn't go with that in the end. What's this? People hugging in Tel Aviv. Oh, this is Qatar. IDF stays in Philadelphia and the Gaza border buffer zone. Is that true? Are they staying in Philadelphia? That would be different from the one in May, wouldn't it? I don't think May was a total withdrawal. So much for Greater Israel. It's okay. Listen, everyone who said that Israel was planning permanent settlement of Gaza, like, whatever. It is what it is. Are all the hostages released from this deal? Nope. The only thing that we're fully set on is 33 are being returned. We don't know how many of them are dead or alive, I don't think. Someone in chat said 10 are dead, but who knows? Who knows? I'm just a bit relieved that the fighting's stopping. What it means politically going forward, I have no idea, but do we have any idea about the total hostages count remaining? The number I last heard was 98. 98. And the number of dead in there, I don't know how many of those are dead. I think it's like over 20 or 30, but I can't remember. They'll still control some of Netzarim. Okay. Don't know, chat. How do we feel? You're saying it seems like nothing happens in phase one. Well, these are the fine details of phase one. They have a whole thing here. Hamas releases 3 detainees on the 3rd day of the agreement, after which Hamas releases 3 more every 7 days, starting with women whenever possible, civilians and female soldiers. In the 6th week, they release all remaining civilian detainees. On 22nd day, the Israeli side releases all prisoners of the Shalit deal who were rearrested. Yeah, it's like it's quite detailed. It's quite detailed. This is from Qatar, Egypt, United States, United Nations. I'd be very curious to see how many hostages returned dead or alive. Maybe also look out for any big names from the Palestinian side who get returned. I know some of them have life sentences. And I know there's a whole thing of like people in Jerusalem with signs saying like, why are you releasing the guy who murdered my sister or whatever the fuck? Yeah, that kind of shit. Are the Houthis going to release the Galaxy hostages? Oh yeah. Remember those guys. Remember those guys. They say about 30 hostages are dead at least. Yep, that's what I heard. Was Barghouti in the list? I don't think so. Although I believe he was on the list. Oh, is he? For the Hamas wanted. What's this? Israel sends Hamas a list of security prisoners to be released. Barghouti is not among them. Nope. Ben-Gvir threatened to quit the government if the deal went through. Yeah, I said that. Yeah, we know. We know. Isn't Barghouti pretty secular? Yep. He is very much that thing. Picture in picture. Wow. No, Barghouti is a murderer. Really? I don't think they're drawing the line at releasing murderers, man. Some of these people have life sentences who are getting released. They're releasing murderers and attempted murderers. So I wouldn't worry about that. The reason they don't want to release Barghouti would be because of a political thing, right? Because he's like a political threat, because he's so popular. Anyway. Can I get back to my thing now? Fuck this.